The history of Pakistan encompasses the history of the region constituting modern Pakistan. Prior to independence in 1947, the land that is now Pakistan was a part of India and ruled in different periods by local kings and numerous imperial powers. The ancient history of the region comprising present-day Pakistan also includes some of the oldest empires of Indian subcontinent and some of its major civilizations. By the 18th century the land was incorporated into British India. Pakistan's political history began with the birth of the All India Muslim League in 1906 to protect Muslim interests, amid neglect and under-representation, and to oppose Congress and growing Indian nationalism. In return the British Raj would decide to grant local self-rule. On December 29, 1930, philosopher Sir Muhammad Iqbal called for an autonomous new state in northwestern India for Indian Muslims. The League rose to popularity in the late 1930s. Muhammad Ali Jinnah espoused the two-nation theory and led the League to adopt the Lahore Resolution of 1940, demanding the formation of independent states in the east and the west of British India. Eventually, a successful movement led by Jinnah resulted in the partition of India and independence from Britain, on August 14, 1947. On March 12, 1949, the Second Constituent Assembly of Pakistan passed the Objectives Resolution, which was proposed by the first Prime Minister Liaquat Ali Khan, proclaimed that the future constitution of Pakistan would not be modelled entirely on a European pattern, but on the ideology and democratic faith of Islam. The legislative elections in 1954 saw the Awami League coming to power and its leader Hussein Suhrawardy becoming country's first Bengali prime minister. Promulgation of constitution in 1956 led to Pakistan declaring itself Islamic Republic with the adoption of parliamentary democratic system of government. The constitution transformed the Governor-General of Pakistan into President of Pakistan. Subsequently, Iskandar Mirza became the first president as well as first Bengali in 1956, but the democratic system was stalled after President Mirza imposed the military coup d'état Copyright Act and appointed Ayub Khan as an enforcer of martial law. 2 weeks later, President Mirza was ousted by Ayub Khan. His presidency saw an era of internal instability and a second war with India in 1965. Economic grievances and political disenfranchisement in East Pakistan led to violent political tensions and armed repression, escalating into guerrilla war followed by the Third War with India. Pakistan's defeat in the war ultimately led to the secession of East Pakistan and the birth of Bangladesh. Democracy again returned, which was resumed from 1972 to 1977 under leftist PPP led by Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, until he was vanquished by General Zia ul-Haq, who became the country's third military president. Pakistan's banished secular policies were replaced by the new Islamic Sharia legal code, which increased religious influences on the civil service and the military. With the death of President Zia ul-Haq in 1988, the new general elections announced the victory of PPP led by Benazir Bhutto, who was elevated as the country's first female Prime Minister of Pakistan. Over the next decade, she alternated power with conservative Pakistan Muslim League N, led by Nawaz Sharif, as the country's political and economic situation becoming worsen. Military tensions in the Kargil conflict with India were followed by a 1999 coup d'état Copyright Act in which General Pervez Musharraf assumed executive powers. Self-appointing himself as president after the resignation of President Rafiq Tara, Musharraf held nationwide general elections in 2002 to transfer the executive powers to newly elected Prime Minister Zafar Ali Khan Jamali, who was succeeded in the 2004 by Shaukat Aziz. During the election campaign in 2007 following the parliament completing its term on November 15, 2007, Benazir Bhutto was assassinated, which resulted in a series of important political developments when left-wing alliance led by PPP. The historic general elections held in 2013 marked the return of PML-N, coming to national prominence with Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif assuming the leadership of the country for the third time in the history. Prehistory, Sogdian culture. The Sogdian is an archaeological culture of the Lower Paleolithic, contemporary to the Acheulean. It is named after the Son Valley in the Shivalik Hills, near modern-day Islamabad Rawalpindi. In Adarila and Hezla, About 16 kilometers from Rawalpindi, on the bend of the Sone River, hundreds of edged pebble tools were discovered. No human skeletons of this age have yet been found. In the Sone River Gorge, many fossil-bearing rocks are exposed on the surface. The 14-million-year-old fossils of gazelle, rhinoceros, crocodile, giraffe and rodents have been found there. Some of these fossils are on display at Pakistan Museum of Natural History. Mughal period. Mughal on the Kachi plain of Balochistan, is an important Neolithic site discovered in 1974, with early evidence of farming and herding, and dentistry. Early residents lived in mud brick houses, stored grain in granaries, fashioned tools with copper ore, cultivated barley, wheat, jujubes and dates, and herded sheep, goats and cattle. As the civilization progressed, residents began to engage in crafts, including flint knapping, tanning, bead production, and metalworking. The site was occupied continuously until 2600 BCE, when climatic changes began to occur. Between 2600 and 2000 BCE, region became more arid and Mughal was abandoned in favor of the Indus Valley, where a new civilization was in the early stages of development. Indus Valley Civilization. The Indus Valley Civilization developed between 3300 and 1700 BCE on the banks of the Indus River. At its peak, the civilization hosted a population of approximately 5 million in hundreds of settlements extending as far as the Arabian Sea, present-day southern and eastern Afghanistan, the tip of southeastern Iran and the Himalayas. Major urban centers were at Dholavira, Kalibangan, Harappa, Lothal, Mohenjo-daro, and Rakhigarhi, as well as an offshoot called the Kali culture in southern Balochistan, which had similar settlements, pottery and other artifacts. The civilization collapsed abruptly around 1700 BCE. In the early part of the second millennium BCE, the Rig Vedic civilization existed, between the Sapta Sindhu and Ganges-Yamuna rivers. The city of Taxila in northern Pakistan, became important to Vedic religion. Early history, Vedic period. Early Vedic society consisted of largely pastoral groups, with late Harappan urbanization having been abandoned. After the time of the Rig Veda, Aryan society became increasingly agricultural and was socially organized around the four Varnas, or social classes. In addition to the Vedas, the principal texts of Hinduism, the core themes of the Sanskrit epics Ramayana and Mahabharata are said to have their ultimate origins during this period. The early Indo-Aryan presence probably corresponds, in part, to the ochre-colored pottery culture and archaeological contexts. The Kuru kingdom corresponds to the black and red ware and painted grey ware cultures and to the beginning of the Iron Age in South Asia, around 1000 BCE, as well as with the composition of the Atharva Veda, the first Vedic text to mention iron, as angstram yamayas, literally black metal. The painted grey ware culture spanned much of northern India from about 1100 to 600 BCE. The Vedic period also established republics such as Vaishali, which existed as early as the 6th century BCE and persisted in some areas until the 4th century CE. The later part of this period corresponds with an increasing movement away from the previous tribal system towards the establishment of kingdoms, called Mahajanapadas. Achaemenid Empire. Little is known about the Achaemenid Persian invasion of modern-day Pakistan, as historical sources and evidence are scant about the easternmost regions of the empire, and fragmentary, containing little detail. There is no archaeological evidence of Achaemenid control over modern-day Pakistan, as not a single archaeological site that can be positively identified with the Achaemenid Empire has been found anywhere in Pakistan, including at Taxila. What is known about the easternmost satraps and borderlands of the Achaemenid Empire are alluded to in the Darius inscriptions and from Greek sources such as the histories of Herodotus and the later Alexander Chronicles. These sources list 3 Indian tributaries or conquered territories that were subordinated to the Persian Empire and made to pay tributes to the Persian kings, Gandhara, Satyajidya and Hindush. Gandhara and Satyajidya are listed amongst the provinces inherited by Darius when he seized the throne in 522 BC in his commemorative Behistun inscription. However, the dates of the initial annexation of these 2 regions is not certain. the locations of Satyajidya and Hindush and the extent of their boundaries have not been identified either, though it is certain that these two tributaries existed along the river Indus, as the name Hindush is analogous with the Indus and was derived by the Persians from the Sanskrit word Sindhu. Additionally, much of what constitutes Balochistan province in southwest Pakistan formed part of the Achaemenid satrap of Gedrosia. Greek rule, Empire of Alexander the Great. After the defeat of the Persian Achaemenid Empire, Alexander the Great, the Greek king from Macedonia, invaded the region of modern Pakistan and conquered much of the Punjab region. After defeating King Porus in the Battle of the Hytasps, his battle-weary troops refused to advance further into India to engage the army of Nanda dynasty and its vanguard of trampling elephants. Alexander, therefore, proceeded southwest along the Indus Valley. Along the way, he engaged in several battles with smaller kingdoms before marching his army westward across the Makran Desert towards what is now Iran. Alexander founded several new Macedonian and Greek settlements in Gandhara, Punjab and Sindh. During that time, many Greeks settled all over in Pakistan, initiating interaction between the culture of Hellenistic Greece and the region's prevalent Hindu and Buddhist cultures. After Alexander's death in 323 BC, his Diadochi divided the empire among themselves, with the Macedonian warlord Seleucus setting up the Seleucid kingdom, which included the Indus Plain. Around 250 BCE, the eastern part of the Seleucid kingdom broke away to form the Greco-Bactrian kingdom. Maurya Empire. Modern-day Pakistan was conquered by Chandragupta Maurya, who overthrew the powerful Nanda dynasty of Magadha and established the Maurya Empire. He conquered the Trans-Indus region to the west, which was under Macedonian rule, annexing Balochistan, the tip of southeastern parts of Iran and much of what is now Afghanistan, including the modern Herat and Kandahar provinces, and then defeated the invasion led by Seleucus I, a Greek general from Alexander's army. Seleucus is said to have reached a peace treaty with Chandragupta by giving him control of the territory south of the Hindu Kush upon intermarriage as well as 500 elephants. Alexander took these away from the Indo-Aryans and established settlements of his own, but Seleucus Nicator gave them to Sandracoptus, upon terms of intermarriage and of receiving in exchange 500 elephants. Emperors Chandragupta and Bindusar expanded the empire into India's central and southern areas, while Ashoka pushed further into previously unexplored tribal and forested regions near Kalinga. With an area of 5 million km², the Maurya Empire was one of the world's largest empires in its time, and the largest ever in the South Asia. At its greatest extent, the empire stretched to the north along the natural boundaries of the Himalayas, and to the east stretching into what is now Assam province near the border with modern Myanmar. Under Chandragupta and his successors, internal and external trade, agriculture and economic activities, all thrived and expanded across India thanks to the creation of a single and efficient system of finance, administration, and security. Mauryan India also enjoyed an era of social harmony, religious transformation, and expansion of the sciences and of knowledge. Mauryans were followers of Buddhism and Hinduism. Chandragupta Maurya's embrace of Jainism increased social and religious renewal and reform across his society, while Ashoka's embrace of Buddhism has been said to have been the foundation of the reign of social and political peace and non-violence across all of South Asia. Ashoka sponsored the spreading of Buddhist ideals into Sri Lanka, Southeast Asia, West Asia and Mediterranean Europe. After the Kalinga War, the empire experienced half a century of peace and security under Ashoka. Mauryan Empire's decline began 60 years after Ashoka's rule ended, and it dissolved in 185 BC with the foundation of the Sungha dynasty in Magadha. Gandhara civilization. Greco-Buddhism was the syncretism between the culture of classical Greece and Buddhism in the then Gandhara region of modern Afghanistan and Pakistan, between the 4th century BCE and the 5th century CE. It influenced the artistic development of Buddhism, and in particular Mahayana Buddhism, before it spread to Central and Eastern Asia, from the 1st century CE onward. Demetrius invaded northern India in 180 BCE as far as Pataliputra and established an Indo-Greek kingdom. To the south, the Greeks captured Sindh and nearby coastal areas, completing the invasion by 175 BCE and was stopped by the Indian Mughal Empire to the east. Meanwhile, in Bactria, the usurper Eucratides killed Demetrius in a battle. Although the Indo-Greeks lost part of the Gangetic Plain, their kingdom lasted nearly 2 centuries. Indo-Greeks. The Indo-Greek Menandri drove the Greco-Bactrians out of Gandhara and beyond the Hindu Kush, becoming a king shortly after his victory. His territories covered Panjshir and Kapisa in modern Afghanistan and extended to the Punjab region, with many tributaries to the south and east, possibly as far as Mathura. The capital Sagla prospered greatly under Menander's rule, and Menander is one of the few Bactrian kings mentioned by Greek authors. The classical Buddhist text Milinda Paul ± praises Menander, saying there was none equal to Milinda in all India. His empire survived him in a fragmented manner until the last independent Greek king, Strato II, disappeared around 10 CE. Around 125 BCE, the Greco-Bactrian king Heliocles, son of Eucratides, fled from the Uazi invasion of Bactria and relocated to Gandhara, pushing the Indo-Greeks east of the Jhelum River. The last known Indo-Greek ruler was Theodamas, from the Bar area of Gandhara, mentioned on a 1st century CE signet ring, bearing the Karawa to the first high inscription Su Theodamasa. Various petty kings ruled into the early 1st century CE, until the conquests by the Scythians, Parthians and the Uazi, who founded the Kushan dynasty. Indo-Scythians. The Indo-Scythians were descended from the Sakas who migrated from southern Siberia to Pakistan and Arachosia from the middle of the 2nd century BCE to the 1st century BCE. They displaced the Indo-Greeks and ruled a kingdom that stretched from Gandhara to Mathura. The power of the Saka rulers started to decline in the 2nd century CE after the Scythians were defeated by the South Indian Emperor Gautamiputra Satakani of the Satavahana dynasty. Later the Saka kingdom was completely destroyed by Chandragupta II of the Gupta Empire from eastern India in the 4th century. Indo-Parthians. The Pani, a nomadic Iranian Central Asian tribe, invaded Parthia in the middle of the 3rd century BCE, drove away its Greek satrap Suyuro, who had just then proclaimed independence from the Seleucid Suyuro, and annexed much of the Indus region, thus founding an Arsacids dynasty of Scythian or Bactrian origin. Following the decline of the Central Parthian authority after clashes with their arch-rival the Roman Empire, a local Parthian leader, Gondophares established the Indo-Parthian kingdom in the 1st century CE. The kingdom was ruled from Taxila and covered much of modern southeast Afghanistan and Pakistan. Christian writings claim that the Apostle St. Thomas, an architect and skilled carpenter, had a long sojourn in the court of King Gondophares, had built a palace for the king at Taxila and had also ordained leaders for the church before leaving for Indus Valley in a chariot, for sailing out to eventually reach Malabar coast. Kushan Empire. Your next important chapter in Pakistan's history begins with the arrival of another wave of Central Asian tribes called the Uazi, a branch of which was known as the Kushans. The Kushan kingdom was founded by King Hurriyos, and greatly expanded by his successor, Kijula Kadphises. Kadphises' son, Vimatakto conquered territory now in India, but lost much of the west of the kingdom to the Parthians. The 4th Kushan emperor, Kanishka I, had a winter capital at Purusharapura and a summer capital at Kapisa. Kushans brought new trends to the budding and blossoming Gandhara art, which reached its peak during Kushan rule. Punjab and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa have been seats of learning and art, centers of great religious activity and pivots of political power during that period. The kingdom linked the Indian Ocean maritime trade with the commerce of the Silk Road through the Indus Valley. At its height, the empire extended from the Aral Sea to northern India, encouraging long-distance trade, particularly between China and Rome. Kanishka convened a great Buddhist council in Taxila, marking the start of the pantheistic Mahayana Buddhism and its scission with Nika Buddhism. The art and culture of Gandhara are the best-known expressions of the interaction of Greek and Buddhist cultures also continued over several centuries, until the 5th century CE White Hun invasions of Scythia. The travelogues of Chinese pilgrims Faxian and Huanzang describe the state of famed Buddhist seminary at Taxila and the status of Buddhism in the region of Pakistan in this period. Gupta Empire. The Gupta Empire existed approximately from 320 to 600 CE and covered much of the South Asia, including modern Pakistan. Founded by Maharaja Sri Gupta, the dynasty was the model of a classical civilization and was marked by extensive inventions and discoveries. The high points of this cultural creativity are magnificent architectures, sculptures and paintings. Science and political administration reached new heights during the Gupta era. Strong trade ties also made the region an important cultural center and set the region up as a base that would influence nearby kingdoms and regions in Burma, Sri Lanka, maritime Southeast Asia and Indochina. The empire gradually declined due in part to loss of territory and imperial authority caused by their own erstwhile feudatories, and from the invasion by the Hunas from Central Asia. After the collapse of the Gupta Empire in the 6th century, India was again ruled by numerous regional kingdoms. A minor line of the Gupta clan continued to rule Magadha after the disintegration of the empire. These Guptas were ultimately ousted by the Vardhana king Harsha, who established an empire in the first half of the 7th century. Rajput dynasties. The parts of Pakistan have been home to many Rajput dynasties during 7th to 20th century. Sassanid Empire. Over the next few centuries, while the Parthians and Kushans shared control of the Indus plain until the arrival of the White Huns, the Persian Sassanid Empire dominated the region as part of their easternmost territories. The White Huns. The Hephthalites, also known as the White Huns, were a nomadic confederation in Central Asia during the late antiquity period. The White Huns, who seem to have been part of the predominantly Buddhist group, established themselves in Afghanistan by the first half of the 5th century, with their capital at Bamiyan. Led by the Hun military leader Toramana, they overran the northern region of Pakistan and northwestern India and made their capital at the city of Saikala, modern Silkut in Pakistan, under Toramana's son, Emperor Mihirakula, who was a Saivite Hindu. Hywan Tsiang narrates Mihirakula's merciless persecution of Buddhists and destruction of monasteries. The Huns were defeated by the Indian kings Yasovarman of Malwa and Narasimhagupta of the Gupta Empire in the 6th century and were driven out of India. White Huns are believed to be among the ancestors of modern-day Pashtuns, Ray dynasty. According to Arab chroniclers, the Ray dynasty of Sind arose after the end of Ray dynasty. They were practitioners of Hinduism and Buddhism. They established a huge temple of Shiva in present-day Saqqara derived from original Shankara close to their capital in Al-Ra. At the time of Ray-Diaji, influence of the Ray state extended from Kashmir in the east, Makran and Ebilport in the south, Kandahar, Sistan, Suleiman, Ferdan and Kai Konan hills in the north. Pala Empire. The Pala Empire was an Indian imperial power. It was ruled by a Buddhist dynasty from Bengal in the eastern region of the Indian subcontinent. At the time of their greatest extent from 770 to 850 AD they ruled over northern parts of Pakistani regions. Later medieval age. Arab Empire. Although soon after conquering the Middle East from the Byzantine Empire and the Sassanid Empire, Arab forces had reached the present western regions of Pakistan, during the period of Rashidun Caliphacy. It was in 712 CE that a young Arab general called Muhammad bin Qasim conquered most of the Indus region for the Umayyad Empire, to be made the Sindh province with its capital at El Mansura, 72 km north of modern Hyderabad in Sindh. But the instability of the empire and the defeat in various wars with North Indian and South Indian rulers including the Battle of Rajasthan, where the Hindu rulers like the South Indian Emperor Vikramaditya II of the Chalukya dynasty and Nagabhata of the Prashihara dynasty defeated the Umayyad Arabs, they were contained till only Sindh and southern Punjab. There was gradual conversion to Islam in the south, especially amongst the native Hindu and Buddhist majority, but in areas north of Multan, Hindus and Buddhists remained numerous. By the end of 10th century CE, the region was ruled by several Hindu Shahi kings who would be subdued by the Ghaznavids. Ghaznavid dynasty. In 997 CE, the Turkic ruler Mahmud of Azi, took over the Ghaznavid dynasty empire established by his father, Spuktegin, a Turkic origin ruler. Starting from the city of Azi, Mahmud conquered the bulk of Khorasan, marched on Peshawar against the Hindu Shahs in Kabul in 1005, and followed it by the conquests of Punjab, deposed the Shia Ismaili rulers of Multan Kashmir and Ghnok. By the end of his reign in 1030, Mahmud's empire briefly extended from Kurdistan in the west to the Yamuna River in the east, and the Ghaznavid dynasty lasted until 1187. Contemporary historians such as Abul Fazl Bihaqi and Ferdowsi described extensive building work in Lahore, as well as Mahmud's support and patronage of learning, literature and the arts. Mahmud's successors, known as the Ghaznavids, ruled for 157 years. Their kingdom gradually shrank in size, and was racked by bitter succession struggles. The Hindu Rajput kingdoms of western India reconquered the eastern Punjab, and by the 1160s, the line of demarcation between the Ghaznavid state and the Hindu kingdoms approximated to the present-day boundary between India and Pakistan. The Urid Empire of central Afghanistan occupied Azi around 1160, and the Ghaznavid capital was shifted to Lahore. Later Muhammad Ghori conquered the Ghaznavid kingdom, occupying Lahore in 1187. Delhi Sultanate. In 1160, Muhammad Ghori, a Turkic ruler, conquered Ghazni from the Ghaznavids and became its governor in 1173. He for the first time named Sintambade Gata, roughly translated as the Red Passage. He marched eastwards into the remaining Ghaznavid territory in Gujarat in the 1180s, but was rebuffed by Gujarat's Hindu Solanki rulers. In 1186–87, he conquered Lahore, bringing the last of Azavid territory under his control and ending the Ghaznavid Empire. Muhammad Ghori's successors established the Delhi Sultanate. The Turkic origin Mamluk dynasty seized the throne of the Sultanate in 1211. Several Central Asian Turkic dynasties ruled their empires from Delhi: the Mamluk, the Khalji, the Tughlaq, the Said and the Lodi. Although some kingdoms remained independent of Delhi and Gujarat, Malwa, Bengal and Deccan almost all of the Indus plain came under the rule of these large sultanates. The sultans of Delhi enjoyed cordial relations with rulers in the Near East but owed them no allegiance. While the sultans ruled from urban centers, their military camps and trading posts provided the nuclei for many towns that sprang up in the countryside. Close interaction with local populations led to cultural exchange, and the resulting Indo-Islamic fusion has left a lasting imprint and legacy in South Asian architecture, music, literature, lifestyle and religious customs. In addition, the language of Urdu was born during the Delhi Sultanate period, as a result of the mingling of speakers of native Prakrits, Persian, Turkish and Arabic languages. Perhaps the greatest contribution of the Sultanate was its temporary success in insulating South Asia from the Mongol invasion from Central Asia in the 13th century. Nonetheless, the Sultans eventually lost Afghanistan and western Pakistan to the Mongols. The Sultanate declined after the invasion of Emperor Timur, who founded the Timurid dynasty, and was eventually conquered in 1526 by the Mughal Emperor Babar. During the Delhi Sultanate and later Mughal Empire attracted Muslim refugees, nobles, technocrats, bureaucrats, soldiers, traders, scientists, architects, artisans, teachers, poets, artists, theologians and Sufis from the rest of the Muslim world, and they migrated and settled in the South Asia. During the reign of Sultan Ghiyasuddin Balban, thousands of Central Asian Muslims sought asylum, including more than 15 sovereigns and their nobles, due to the Mongol invasion of Khwarezmia and eastern Iran. At the court of Sultan Iltutmish in Delhi, the first wave of these Muslim refugees escaping from the Central Asian genocide perpetrated by the barbaric hordes of Genghis Khan, brought administrators from Iran, painters from China, theologians from Samarkand, Nishapur and Bukhara, divines and saints from the rest of Muslim world, craftsmen and men and maidens from every region, doctors adept in Greek medicine, philosophers from everywhere. Guru Nanak was born in the village of Rai-Buidar Talwanda, now called Nankana, near Sial in modern-day Pakistan, into a Hindu Khatri family. He was an influential religious and social reformer of North India and the saintly founder of a modern monotheistic order and first of the 10 divine gurus of Sikh religion. At the age of 70, he died at Khatapur, Punjab of modern-day Pakistan. Mughal Empire. In 1526, Babur, a Timurid descendant of Timur and Genghis Khan from Fergana Valley, swept across the Khyber Pass and founded the Mughal Empire, covering modern-day Afghanistan, Pakistan, India and Bangladesh. The Mughals were descended from Central Asian Turks. However, his son Humayun was defeated by the Afghan warrior Shah Suri, who was from Bahawalpur state of India, in the year 1540, and Humayun was forced to retreat to Kabul. After Shah died, his son Islam Shah Suri became the ruler, on whose death his prime minister, Humayun, ascended the throne and ruled North India from Delhi for 1 month. He was defeated by Emperor Akbar's forces in the Second Battle of Panipat on November 6, 1556. Akbar the Great was both a capable ruler and an early proponent of religious and ethnic tolerance and favored an early form of multiculturalism. He declared Amari, or non-killing of animals in the holy days of Jainism, and rolled back the jizya tax imposed upon non-Islamic mainly Hindu people. The Mughal dynasty ruled most of the South Asia by 1600. The Mughal emperors married local royalty and allied themselves with local maharajas. For a short time in the late 16th century, Lahore was the capital of the empire. The architectural legacy of the Mughals in Lahore includes the Shalimar Gardens built by the 5th Emperor Shah Jahan, and the Badshahi Mosque built by the 6th Emperor, Aurangzeb, who is regarded as the last great Mughal emperor as he expanded the domain to its zenith. After his demise, different regions of modern Pakistan began asserting independence. The empire went into a slow decline after 1707 and its last sovereign, ruling around Delhi region. Post-Mughal era. Afsharid Empire. The Iranian military genius Nader Shah overran the entire region during his invasion of the weak Mughal Empire. Even though the Mughals were slowly declining since 1707, Nader's invasion, humiliation, and looting of the Mughals would drastically accelerate the pace at which it was going. It would also alert more invaders to overrun the weak empire and all its territories and regions, including most notably the British, who would assess their first firm hold in both India and what is now Pakistan just years after Nader's invasion. Durrani Empire. After Nadir Shah's death, in 1747 Ahmad Shah Abdali, the Afghan general of Nadir Shah, declared South Afghanistan independent and established the Durrani Empire, which encompassed most of Pakistan, including the shared Kashmir region. Maratha Empire. In 1758 the Maratha Empire's general Raghunath Rao marched onwards, attacked and conquered Punjab, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and Kashmir and drive out Timur Shah Durrani, the son and viceroy of Ahmad Shah Abdali. Lahore, Dera Ghazi Khan, Multan, Peshawar, Kashmir and other subas on the southeastern side of Afghanistan's border were under the Maratha rule for the most part. From Punjab, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and Kashmir, the Marathas were driven out only after 4 years. Durrani Reconquest. In 1761, following the victory at the Third Battle of Panipat between the Durrani and the Maratha Empire, Ahmad Shah Abdali captured remnants of the Maratha Empire in Punjab and Kashmir regions and had reconsolidated control over them. Sikh Empire. The Sikh Empire was formed on the foundations of the Punjabi army by Maharaja Ranjit Singh, who was proclaimed Sakar-i-Khalsa, and was referred to as the Maharaja of Lahore. It consisted of a collection of autonomous Punjabi misls, which were governed by misldars, mainly in the Punjab region. The empire extended from the Khyber Pass in the west, to Kashmir in the north, to Multan in the south and Kapurthala in the east. The main geographical footprint of the empire was the Punjab region. The formation of the empire was a watershed and represented formidable consolidation of Sikh military power and resurgence of local culture, which had been dominated for hundreds of years by Indo-Afghan and Indo-Mughal hybrid cultures. The foundations of the Sikh Empire, during the time of the Punjabi army, could be defined as early as 1707, starting from the death of Aurangzeb. The fall of the Mughal Empire provided opportunities for the Punjabi army to lead expeditions against the Mughals and Pashtuns. This led to a growth of the army, which was split into different Punjabi armies and then semi-independent misls. Each of these component armies were known as a misl, each controlling different areas and cities. However, in the period from 1760 to 1799, Sikh rulers of their misls appeared to be coming into their own. The formal start of the Sikh Empire began with the disbandment of the Punjab army by the time of coronation of Ranjit Singh in 1801, creating a unified political state. All the Misl leaders who were affiliated with the army were nobility with usually long and prestigious family histories in Punjab's history. British rule, British colonisation, conquest, and cultural heritage. The entire territory of modern Pakistan was occupied by the East India Company, later coming under the rule of Queen Victoria of the British Empire, through a series of wars, the main ones being the Battle of Mani in Sindh, the grueling Anglo-Sikh Wars and the Anglo-Afghan Wars, to remain a part of British Empire until the independence in 1947. The physical presence of the British was minimal. They employed divide-and-rule political strategy to remain in power. The administrative units of British India under the tenancy or the sovereignty of either the East India Company or the British Crown lasted between 1612 and 1947. Pakistan Movement, early period of Pakistan Movement. In 1877, Syed Amir Ali had formed the Central National Mohammedan Association to work towards the political advancement of the Indian Muslims, who had suffered grievously in 1857, in the aftermath of the failed Sepoy mutiny against the East India Company. The British were seen as foreign invaders. But the organisation declined towards the end of the 19th century. In 1885, the Indian National Congress was founded as a forum, which later became a party, to promote a nationalist cause. Although the Congress attempted to include the Muslim community in the struggle for independence from the British rule, and some Muslims were very active in the Congress, the majority of Muslim leaders did not trust the party, viewing it as a Hindu-dominated organisation. Some Muslims felt that an independent united India would inevitably be ruled by Hindus, and that there was a need to address the issue of the Muslim identity within India. A turning point came in 1900, when the British administration in the United Provinces of Agra and Oudh acceded to Hindu demands and made Hindi, written in the Devanagari script, the official language. The proselytization conducted in the region by the activists of a new Hindu reformist movement also stirred Muslims' concerns about their faith. Eventually, the Muslims feared that the Hindu majority would seek to suppress Muslim culture and religion in the region of an independent India. The Muslim League, the All India Muslim League, was founded on December 30, 1906, in the aftermath of division of Bengal, on the sidelines of the annual All India Mohammedan Educational Conference in Shahbar, Dhaka. The meeting was attended by 3,000 delegates and presided over by Nawab Vikram Mulk. It addressed the issue of safeguarding interests of Muslims and finalized a program. A resolution, moved by Nawab Salimullah and seconded by Hakim Ajmal Khan. Nawab Vikram Mulk, conservative, declared, "The Musalmans are only a fifth in number as compared with the total population of the country, and it is manifest that if at any remote period the British government ceases to exist in India, then the rule of India would pass into the hands of that community which is nearly 4 times as large as ourselves. Our life, our property, our honour, and our faith will all be in great danger, when even now that a powerful British administration is protecting its subjects, we the Musalmans have to face most serious difficulties in safeguarding our interests from the grasping hands of our neighbours." The constitution and principles of the League were contained in the Green Book, written by Maulana Muhammad Ali. Its goals at this stage did not include establishing an independent Muslim state, but rather concentrated on protecting Muslim liberties and rights, promoting understanding between the Muslim community and other Indians, educating the Muslim and Indian community at large on the actions of the government, and discouraging violence. However, several factors over the next 30 years, including sectarian violence, led to a re-evaluation of the League's aims. Among those Muslims in the Congress who did not initially join the League was Jinnah, a prominent statesman and barrister in Bombay. This was because the first article of the League's platform was to promote among the Musalmans of India, feelings of loyalty to the British government. In 1907, a vocal group of Hindu hardliners within the Indian National Congress movement separated from it and started to pursue a pro-Hindu movement openly. This group was spearheaded by the famous trio of Lal Baul Pal, Lala Lajpat, Bal Gangadhar Tilak and Bipin Chandra Pal of Punjab, Bombay and Bengal provinces respectively. their influence spread rapidly among other like-minded Hindus. They called it Hindu nationalism, and it became a cause of serious concern for Muslims. However, Jinnah did not join the League until 1913, when the party changed its platform to one of Indian independence, as a reaction against the British decision to reverse the 1905 partition of Bengal, which the League regarded it as a betrayal of the Bengali Muslims. After vociferous protests of the Hindu population and violence engineered by secret groups, such as Anushilan Samiti and its offshoot Jugantara of Aurobindo and his brother etc., the British had decided to reunite Bengal again. Till this stage, Jinnah believed in mutual cooperation to achieve an independent, united India, although he argued that Muslims should be guaranteed one-third of the seats in any Indian parliament. The League gradually became the leading representative body of Indian Muslims. Jinnah became its president in 1916, and negotiated the Lucknow Pact with the Congress leader, Bal Gangadhar Tilak, by which Congress conceded the principle of separate electorates and weighted representation for the Muslim community. However, Jinnah broke with the Congress in 1920 when the Congress leader, Mohandas Gandhi, launched a law-violating non-cooperation movement against the British, which a temperamentally law-abiding barrister Jinnah disapproved of. Jinnah also became convinced that the Congress would renounce its support for separate electorates for Muslims, which indeed it did in 1928. In 1927, the British proposed a constitution for India as recommended by the Simon Commission, but they failed to reconcile all parties. The British then turned the matter over to the League and the Congress, and in 1928 an all-parties Congress was convened in Delhi. The attempt failed, but two more conferences were held, and at the Bombay Conference in May, it was agreed that a small committee should work on the constitution. The prominent Congress leader Motilal Nehru headed the committee, which included two Muslims, Syed Ali Imam and Shubhkar Rishi. Motilal's son, P.T. Jawaharlal Nehru, was its secretary. The League, however, rejected the committee's report, the so-called Nehru Report, arguing that its proposals gave too little representation to Muslims. The League had demanded at least one-third representation in the legislature. Jinnah announced a parting of the ways after reading the report, and relations between the Congress and the League began to sour. Muslim homeland now or never. The general elections held in the United Kingdom had already weakened the leftist Labour Party led by Prime Minister Ramsay MacDonald. Furthermore, the Labour Party's government was already weakened by the outcomes of the World War I, which fueled new hopes for progress towards self-government in British India. In fact, Mohandas Gandhi travelled to London to press the idea of self-government in British India, and claimed to represent all Indians whilst duly criticised the Muslim League as being sectarian and divisive. After reviewing the report of the Simon Commission, the Indian Congress initiated a massive civil disobedience movement under Gandhi. The Muslim League reserved their opinion on the Simon Report, declaring that the report was not final and the matters should be decided after consultations with the leaders representing all communities in India. As the leaders of the Indian Congress were jailed and restrained, the Round Table Conference was held, but these achieved little, since Gandhi and the League were unable to reach a compromise. Witnessing the events in the Round Table Conference, Jinnah had despaired of politics and particularly of getting mainstream parties like the Congress to be sensitive to minority priorities. During this time in 1930, notable writer and poet, Muhammad Iqbal called for a separate and autonomous nation-state, who in his presidential address to the 1930 convention of the Muslim League said that he felt that a separate Muslim state was essential in an otherwise Hindu-dominated South Asia. The name of the nation-state was coined by the Cambridge University's political science student and Muslim nationalist Rahmat Ali, and was published on January 28, 1933 in the pamphlet Now or Never. After coining the name of the nation-state, Ali noticed that there is an acronym formed from the names of the homelands of Muslims in northwest India. P for Punjab, A for Afghania, K for Kashmir, S for Sindh, TAN for Balochistan, thus forming Pakistan. An I was later added to the English rendition of the name to ease pronunciation, producing Pakistan, by Ali. In Urdu and Persian languages, the name encapsulates the concept of Pak and Stan and hence a pure land. In the 1935, the British government proposed to hand over substantial power to elected Indian provincial legislatures, with elections to be held in 1937. After the elections the League took office in Bengal and Punjab, but the Congress won office in most of the other provinces, and refused to devolve power with the League in provinces with large Muslim minorities citing technical difficulties. Meanwhile, Muslim ideologues for independence also felt vindicated by the presidential address of V.D. Savarkar at the 19th session of the famous Hindu nationalist party Hindu Mahasabha in 1937. In it, this legendary revolutionary, popularly called Veer Savarkar and known as the iconic father of the Hindu fundamentalist ideology, propounded the seminal ideas of his two-nation theory or ethnic exclusivism, which influenced Jinnah profoundly. In 1940, Jinnah called a general session of the Muslim League in Lahore to discuss the situation that had arisen due to the outbreak of the World War II and the government of India joining the war without consulting Indian leaders. The meeting was also aimed at analyzing the reasons that led to the defeat of the Muslim League in the general election of 1937 in the Muslim-majority provinces. In his speech, Jinnah criticized the Indian Congress and the nationalists, and espoused the two-nation theory and the reasons for the demand for separate homelands. Sikandar Hayat Khan, the chief minister of Punjab, drafted the original resolution, but disavowed the final version, that had emerged after protracted redrafting by the subject committee of the Muslim League. The final text unambiguously rejected the concept of a united India because of increasing interreligious violence and recommended the creation of independent states. The resolution was moved in the general session by Sher Bangla Bengali nationalist, ul-Haq, the chief minister of Bengal, supported by Chaudhry Kalaikzaman and other leaders, and was adopted on March 23, 1940. The resolution read as follows. No constitutional plan would be workable or acceptable to the Muslims unless geographical contiguous units are demarcated into regions which should be so constituted with such territorial readjustments as may be necessary. That the areas in which the Muslims are numerically in majority as in the northwestern and eastern zones of India should be grouped to constitute independent states in which the constituent units shall be autonomous and sovereign. That adequate, effective and mandatory safeguards shall be specifically provided in the constitution for minorities in the units and in the regions for the protection of their religious, cultural, economic, political, administrative and other rights of the minorities, with their consultation. Arrangements thus should be made for the security of Muslims where they were in a minority. In 1941, it became part of the Muslim League's constitution. However, in early 1941, Sikandar explained to the Punjab Assembly that he did not support the final version of the resolution. The sudden death of Sikandar in 1942 paved the way over the next few years for Jinnah to emerge as the recognized leader of the Muslims of South Asia. In 1943, the Sindh Assembly passed a resolution demanding the establishment of a homeland. Talks between Jinnah and Gandhi in 1944 in Bombay failed to achieve agreement and there were no more attempts to reach a single-state solution. The French and British empires had been under tremendous political and military pressure during the World War II, and the speculations of disintegration of their colonial empires was rumoured in all over the British India. In Northwest Frontier Province, the British military had launched the military expeditions to quell the armed rebellion. In 1945, the general elections were held which saw the leftist Labour Party forming the government in Britain and many Indians were seeing independence within reach. But, Gandhi and Nehru were not receptive to Jinnah's proposal and were also adamantly opposed to dividing India, since they knew that the Hindus, who saw India as one indivisible entity, would never agree to such a thing. In the Constituent Assembly elections of 1946, the League won 425 out of 496 seats reserved for Muslims on a policy of creating an independent state of Pakistan, and with an implied threat of secession if this was not granted. By 1946, the British had neither the will, nor the financial resources or military power, to hold India any longer. Political deadlock ensued in the Constituent Assembly, and the British Prime Minister, Clement Attlee, sent a cabinet mission to India to mediate the situation. When the talks broke down, Attlee appointed Louis Mountbatten as India's last viceroy, to negotiate the independence of Pakistan and India and immediate British withdrawal. Mountbatten, of imperial blood and a World War admiral, handled the problem as a campaign. Ignorant of the complex ground realities in British India, he brought forward the date of transfer of power and told Gandhi and Nehru that if they did not accept division there would be civil war in his opinion, and he would rather consider handing over power to individual provinces and the rulers of princely states. This forced the hands of Congress leaders, and the Independence of India Act 1947 provided for the two dominions of Pakistan and India to become independent on the 14th and 15th August 1947 respectively. This result was despite the calls for a third Usmanistan in the early 1940s. Creation of Pakistan. On August 1947, the British Empire divided the British Indian Empire into two independent and sovereign countries, India and Pakistan. Immediately after the independence, both nations joined the British Commonwealth. The independence of India and Pakistan created the interreligious violence of such magnitude that exchange of population along religious lines became a necessity in each country. More than 2 million people migrated across the new borders and more than 100,000 died in the spate of communal violence that spread even beyond these provinces. Major violence erupted following the division of Punjab, Bengal, and Kashmir, which escalated into leading to the First War between India and Pakistan. With assistance and further United Nations and Soviet Union's involvement ended the war, but it became a hitherto unresolved Kashmir dispute. Following the independence, the Pakistan became involved in continuous territorial disputes with India over Kashmir and Bengal and with the Afghanistan over the tribal line. Its political history has been characterized by authoritarian military rule and the brief democratic competition between right-wing conservatives and left-wing parties throughout its history. State and Constitution, Pakistan, First Democratic Era. In 1947, the founding fathers of Pakistan agreed upon to appoint Liaquat Ali Khan as country's first prime minister, with the founder of Pakistan, Muhammad Ali Jinnah, tenuring as both first Governor-General and President-Speaker of the State Parliament. By the end of months in 1947, the national government led by Prime Minister Ali Khan was able to settle the core issue of territorial boundaries, with composing the state with 5 provinces, Sindh, Punjab, Balochistan, Northwest Frontier, and East Bengal, and 4 administrative units, Gilgit-Baltistan, Kashmir, tribal line aligning with the local belt. The harbour city, Karachi, being the state's first capital. The national government of Ali Khan was left to face challenges soon after holding the office. With the large numbers of Indian Muslims immigrating to Pakistan, the nationalists in each province worried that the new nation was too fragile to withstand an international war, or even internal revolts such as the Balochistan Rebellion in 1948. Considering this issue, Ali Khan established a strong government. His finance secretary Victor Turner announced country's first monetary policy by establishing the State Bank and Federal Bureaus of Statistics and Revenue to improve the statistical finance, taxation, and revenue collection in the country. Ideological and territorial problems arose with neighboring communist states, Afghanistan and Soviet Union over the Durand Line in 1949, and with India over line of control in Kashmir, which was a theatre of First War in 1947. Diplomatic recognition became challenging problem when Soviet Union led by Secretary-General Joseph Stalin did not welcome the division which established Pakistan and India. Iran was the first country to recognize Pakistan in 1947. In 1948, Ben-Gurion of Israel sent a secret courier to Jinnah to establish the diplomatic relations, but Jinnah did not give any response to Ben-Gurion. In 1948 speech, Jinnah declared Urdu alone would be the state language and the lingua franca of the Pakistan state, though he called the Bengali language as the official language of the Bengal province. Nonetheless, tensions began to grow in East Bengal. Jinnah's health further deteriorated and he died in 1948. Bengali leader, Sir Khawaja Nazimuddin succeeded as the Governor-General of Pakistan. During the massive political rally in 1951, Prime Minister Liaquat Ali Khan was assassinated in Rawalpindi, and Nazimuddin became the second Prime Minister. tensions in eastern Pakistan reached its climax in 1952, when the East Pakistani police opened fire on students near the Dhaka Medical College protesting for Bengali language to receive equal status with Urdu. The situation was controlled by Nizamuddin, who gave a waiver to Bengali language as equal status, a right codified in the 1956 constitution. In 1953, at the instigation of religious parties, anti-Ahmadiyya riots erupted, killing scores of Muslims and destroying their properties. The riots were investigated by a two-member court of inquiry in 1954, which was criticized by the Jamaat-e-Islami, one of the parties accused of inciting the riots. This event led to the first instance of martial law in the country and began the inroad of military intervention in the politics and civilian affairs of the country, something that remains to this day. In 1954, the controversial one-unit program was imposed by the last PML Prime Minister Ali Bogra, dividing Pakistan in the German geopolitical model. The same year, the first legislative elections were held in Pakistan, which saw the Communists gaining the control of East Pakistan. The 1954 elections results clarified the differences in ideology between West and East, with East under the influence of communism nexus of Communist Party allying with Workers' Party and the Awami League. The pro-American Republican Party gained majority in West, ousting the PML government, who secured only 10 seats in East. In a vote of confidence movement in state parliament and promulgation of 1956 constitution which granted Pakistan as Islamic Republic, the notable Bengali figures, Hussein Suramadi became the prime minister leading the Communist Socialist Alliance, and Iskandar Mirza became the first president of Pakistan, both as first Bengali leaders of the country. Just 2 years later, the military would take control of the nation. Suramadi's foreign policy was directed towards the improving fractured relations with the USSR, strengthening and establishing relations with the US and China after paying first state visit to both countries. Announcing the new self-reliance program, Suramadi began building a massive military and launched the plan of nuclear power program in the West in an attempt to legitimize his mandate in West. Foreign efforts by Suramadi led to an assigning of American training program for country's armed forces, which met with great opposition in East Pakistan after his party in East Pakistan Parliament which threatened to leave the state of Pakistan. Furthermore, Suramadi gave verbal authorization of leasing the ISI's secret installation to American CIA to conduct operations in Soviet Union. Differences in East Pakistan further encouraged the Baloch separatism, and in an attempt to intimidate the communists in East, President Mirza initiated massive arrests of communists and party workers of Awami League in East Pakistan, which damaged the image of West Pakistan in the East. The Western contingent's lawmakers determinately followed the idea of westernized parliamentary form of the democracy when East opted for becoming a socialist state. One-unit program and centralizing of national economy on USSR model was met with great hostility and resistance in West, although the Eastern contingent's economy was quickly centralized by Suramadi's government. Egoistic problems grew between the two Bengali leaders, further damaging the unity of the country, which soon forced Suramadi, whose political position in his own party lost an edge in a growing influence of cleric, Maulana Bashami. Resigned under a threat of Mirza's dismissal, Suramadi was succeeded by Tu Chandragar in 1957. Within 2 months, Prime Minister I. Chandragar was dismissed. Followed by Sir Firoz Noon, who proved to be an incapable prime minister. The support of Pakistan Muslim League led by Nurul Amin began to get its supports, which threatened President Mirza, who was unapproved by the public. In less than 2 years, Mirza dismissed 4 elected prime ministers, and was increasingly in great pressure for calling for new elections in 1958. First military era. On October 1958, President Iskandar Mirza issued order for massive naval, air, and troop mobilization of Pakistan armed forces all over the country and appointed Chief of Army Staff General Ayub Khan as Commander-in-Chief of Pakistan Armed Forces. In a quick move, President Mirza declared state of emergency and imposed martial law in 1958, having suspended the constitution, and dissolved the socialist government in East and the parliamentary government in West. His actions also approved General Ayub Khan as the chief martial law administrator to enforce the martial law all over the country, who asserted his position in all over the country. Within 2 weeks, President Mtsa also attempted to dismiss General Ayub Khan after Khan's action made him incapable of taking any decisions. This move backfired on President Mtsa, who was soon to relieved from his presidency and exiled to London, United Kingdom in 1958. The same year, General Ayub Khan appointed himself to the rank of a 5-star field marshal and named a new civil-military government under him. Upon becoming the president, Ayub Khan was succeeded by General Muhammad Musa as Chief of Army Staff in 1958. Presidential Republic. The parliamentary system came to an end in 1958, following the imposition of martial law. Tales of corruption in civil bureaucracy and public administration had maligned the democratic process in the country, as the public seemed supportive towards the actions taken by General Ayub Khan. Major land reforms were carried out by the military government and enforced controversial elective bodies disqualification order, which ultimately disqualified Suramadi from holding the public office. Introducing a new presidential system called Basic Democracy, which featured the local government system in West Pakistan, and promulgated 1962 constitution, by which an electoral college of 80,000 would select the president. In a national referendum held in 1960, Ayub Khan secured nationwide popular and ground support for his bid as second president and replaced his military government into civilian constitutional government. In a major development, the capital infrastructure had been moved to newly planned state capital, Islamabad. All capital work development was relocated from Karachi to Islamabad. The presidency of Ayub Khan is often dubbed and celebrated as Great Decade, which highlighted the economic development plans and reforms executed. Under Ayub's presidency, the country took a cultural shift when the pop music industry, film industry and drama picture began to notice by public and became extremely popular in the country in 1960s. Rather than neutrality, Ayub Khan worked closely to make an alliance with the United States and the Western world to gain support, and proceeded to join two formal military alliances, the CENTO in 1955 and the SEATO in 1962, against the Soviet bloc. During this time, the private sector gained more power to control the national economy. Educational reforms, human development and scientific achievements gained a lot of international appraisal from the global community. In 1961, the space program was launched, with a continuation of nuclear power program on the other hand. Military aid from the U.S. grew unprecedentedly, but the country's national security was severely compromised following the exposure of the secret spy operation launching from Peshawar to Soviet Union in 1960. The same year, Pakistan signed water treaty with India in an attempt to normalize the relations. The relations with China further strengthened after the Chinese war with India, and both countries signed a boundary agreement which shifted the balance of the Cold War by bringing Pakistan and China closer together while loosening ties between Pakistan and the United States in 1963. In 1964, the Pakistan Armed Forces quelled the suspected pro-communist revolt in the western Pakistan, allegedly supported by the Afghanistan, where subsequently American armory was used to stop the rebellion. During the controversial 1965 presidential elections, Ayub Khan had almost lost the presidential elections to Fatima Jinnah. In 1965, after Pakistan went ahead with its strategic airborne mission codenamed the Operation Gibraltar, India declared a full-scale war on Pakistan. The war, which ended militarily in a stalemate, was mostly fought in west, as only mild operations were conducted in east by India. Controversially, East Pakistan Army did not interfere in the conflict that brought a great ire in West against East. The news of war with India was highly unapproved by the United States, which dismayed Pakistan by adopting a policy of denying military aid to both India and Pakistan during the Indo-Pakistani War of 1965 over Kashmir and the Rann of Kutch. A positive gain of the treaties was the re-strengthening of Pakistan's close historical bonds with its western neighbors in Asia. A successful intervention of USSR led to signing of Tashkent Agreement between India and Pakistan in 1965. Witnessing the American disapproval and USSR's mediation, Ayub Khan made tremendous efforts to normalize relations with USSR, and Bhutto's negotiation expertise led to the Soviet Premier, Alexei Kosygin, visit to Islamabad. Delivering a blistering speech at the UN General Assembly in 1965, Foreign Minister Zulfikar Ali Bhutto with the atomic scientist Aziz Ahmed present there for good measure, Bhutto made Pakistan's intentions clear and loudly announced that, if India builds the bomb, we will eat grass, even go hungry, but we will get one of owner. We have no other choice. Abdus Salam and Munir Khan jointly collaborated to expand the nuclear power infrastructure, receiving tremendous support from Bhutto. Following such announcement, the nuclear power expansion was given and accelerated after signing a commercial nuclear power plant agreement with GE Canada, and several other agreements with the United Kingdom and France. Disagreeing with the signing of Tashkent Agreement, Zulfikar Bhutto was ousted from the Ministry on personal directives of President Ayub Khan in 1966. Dismissal of Bhutto led to a spontaneous mass demonstrations in public anger against Ayub Khan, leading to major industrial and labor strikes in the country. Within weeks, Ayub Khan lost the momentum in the West and his image was destroyed at the public circles. Amidst further allegations that economic development and hiring for government jobs favored West Pakistan, the Bengali nationalism began to take a sharp rise and an independence movement began to gather ground in East Pakistan. In 1966, the Awami League led by Sheikh Mujibur Rahman demanded the provisional autonomy at the Round Table Conference held by Ayub Khan, which was forcefully rejected by Bhutto. The influence socialism spectrum began to rise after country's notable economist, Mahbub ul-Haq, publishing a report on private sector schemes of evading taxation and the few oligarchs' control over the national economy. In 1967, socialist convention attended by country's leftist philosophers and notable thinkers in Lahore, the Pakistan People's Party was founded with Zulfikar Ali Bhutto becoming its first elected chairman. The People's Party's leaders, J.A. Rahim and Mubashir Hussain, notably announced to defeat the great dictator with the power of the people. In 1967, the PPP tapped a wave of anger against Ayub Khan and successfully called for major labor strikes in the country. Criticism on the United States and Ayub Khan further damaged Ayub Khan's authority in the country. By the end of 1968, Ayub Khan forwarded the Agartala case, which led the arrests of many of Awami League leaders, but forced to withdraw after serious provisional uprising in East. Under pressure from PPP, public resentment, and anger against his administration, Ayub Khan resigned from the presidency in poor health and handing over his authority to Army Commander, a less known in public and heavy alcohol drinker, General Yahya Khan, who imposed martial law and suspended the constitution, thus dissolving the presidential republic. Martial law in Pakistan. Witnessing the events and tensions, President General Yahya Khan was deeply aware of the explosive political situation in the country. In 1969, the progressiveness and socialism in the country was rising, and calls for change of regime was gaining momentum. On a television address to the nation, President Yahya Khan announced his intention to hold the nationwide general elections in the following year and set his motion to transfer power to the elected representatives of the people. Earliest authoritative decisions were towards the establishment of National Security Council by President Yahya Khan to analyze the military and political situation. Virtually suspending the 1962 constitution, President Yahya Khan instead issued the LFO Order No. 1970, which brought radical changes in West. Tightening the grip of martial law, the one-unit program was dissolved in West Pakistan, removing the West prefix from Pakistan, and direct ballot replaced the principle of parity. Territorial changes were carried out on 4 provinces of the country, allowing to retain their geographical structures as it were in 1947. The LFO No. 1970 had restored the borders and geographical positions of 4 provinces as of 1947, and the provincial assemblies and provincial boundaries also were restored. The state parliament, Supreme Court and major government and authoritarian institutions also regained their status. This decree was only limited to West, it had no effects on East. civilians in Ayub Khan's administration were dismissed by the military government appointment of high-profile joint military officers occupying civilian government assignments and posts. The Election Commission registered a total of 24 political parties, and the public meetings attracted a lot of huge crowd. On the eve of the elections in 1970, a cyclone struck East Pakistan killing approximately 500,000 people, though this event did not deter the people to participate in first-ever general elections. Mobilizing support for 6 Points Manifesto, the Awami League secured its electoral support in East Pakistan. The PPP asserted itself even more densely. Its socialist rationale, food, cloth, and shelter, and party's socialist manifesto quickly popularized the party and in a small span of time. The intellectuals, philosophers, and Bhutto's charismatic personality were the key factors that contributed to the popularity of Pakistan People's Party. The conservative, PML led by Nurul Amin, raised the religious and nationalist slogans all over the country. Electoral results showed the Awami League, with achieved an overwhelming victory in East, 162 total seats. The PPP gaining majority in Western contingent but none in East. The PPP's intellectuals maintain contingent and 6 points did not really permit a genuine federation. Although President Yahya Khan invited Awami League for a National Assembly session in Islamabad, but did not hand it over the powers to form the government due to constant pressure by PPP. With no united concessions were seen to be reached, President Yahya Khan consequently appointed Bengali anti-war activist Nurul Amin as Prime Minister with additional office of country's first and only Vice President. Sheikh Mujibur Rahman then launched civil disobedience movement which effectively paralyzed the state machinery of East. Convening a roundtable conference with Bhutto and Rehman in Dhaka, the talks collapsed and President Yahya Khan ordered a genocide against the people of East Pakistan. Searchlight and Barizal led to a crackdown on East Pakistani politicians, civilians, and student activists in all over the East. An arrested Mujibur Rahman was extradited to Islamabad, while the entire Awami League leadership escaped to India to set up a parallel government. Popular Bangladesh Liberation War was supported by India Mukti Bahini. Millions of Bengali Hindus and Muslims took the refuge in eastern India leading to Indian Prime Minister Indira Gandhi announcement to support for the Liberation War, providing direct military assistance. On March 1971, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman declared the independence of Bangladesh, and trained in guerrilla warfare. The Eastern High Command quickly scrambled its operational capabilities under its commanders, General Amir Niazi and Admiral Muhammad Sharif. Exhausted, outflanked and overwhelmed, the Eastern High Command could no longer continue its fight against the intense guerrilla insurgency, and finally surrendered the East to Indian Army. Nearly 90,000 soldiers taken as prisoners of war, and the result was the de facto emergence of the new nation of Bangladesh, thus ending 24 years of turbulent union of the two wings. The figures of the Bengali civilian death toll from the entire civil war vary greatly, depending on the sources. Killing of Bengalis was unsupported by the people of West Pakistan. It continued for 9 long months. Pakistan's official report, by the Hamada Rahman Commission, placed the figure at only 26,000, while estimates range up to 3 million. Discredited by the defeat, President General Yahya Khan resigned and Bhutto was inaugurated as President and Chief Martial Law Administrator on December 20, 1971. Second Democratic Era. The 1971 War on Separation of East Pakistan demoralized and shattered the nation. President General Yahya Khan handed over the political power to Zulfikar Ali Bhutto of the Pakistan People's Party. With PPPs coming to power, the democratic socialists and visionaries came to the power for the first time in the country's history, under a democratic transition. Bhutto made critical decision after dismissing chiefs of army, navy and the air force while authorized home confinement orders for General Yahya Khan and several of his collaborators. He adopted the East Pakistan Commission's recommendations and authorized large-scale court-martial of army officers tainted for their role in East Pakistan. To keep the country united, Bhutto launched a series of internal intelligence operations to crack down on the vociferous nationalist sentiments and movements in the provinces. Proponents of socialism were supported as part of the internal policies, and the PPP faced serious challenges, both on internal and foreign fronts. This period starting from 1971 until 1977 was a period of left-wing democracy, the growth of national spirit, economic nationalization, covert atomic bomb projects, promotion of scientific, literary, cultural activities, and the left-wing socialism. Regarded as the period of reconstruction, rehabilitation, re-establishment, and the rise of the left-wing sphere of the country, the new industrial, manpower development, and the labor policies were promulgated in the ending weeks of December 1971. In 1972, the country's top intelligence services provided an assessment on Indian nuclear program, citing the evidences that India was close to developing a nuclear weapon under its nuclear program. Chairing a secret winter seminar in January 1972, which came to be known as Milton Meeting, Bhutto rallied a large numbers academic scientists to build the atomic bomb for national survival. The atomic bomb project brought together a team of prominent academic scientists and engineers, headed by theoretical physicist Abdus Salam, to develop nuclear devices. Salam later won the Nobel Prize for Physics for developing the theory for unification of weak nuclear forces and strong electromagnetic forces. In 1973, a serious nationalist rebellion also took place in Balochistan province and led to harsh suppression of Baloch rebels, with the Shah of Iran purportedly assisting with their support in order to prevent the conflict from spilling over into Iranian Balochistan. The conflict ended later after an amnesty and subsequent stabilization by the provincial military administrator Rahimuddin Khan. In 1973, Parliament approved a supreme, but a new constitution, which provided the basis for the parliamentary democracy in the country. Bhutto and his government carried out major and serious reforms for establishment and development and redesigning of the country's infrastructure. First and foremost, Bhutto supervised the successful promulgation of 1973 constitution that validated the parliamentary democracy in the country. The establishment of Joint Chiefs Committee, reorganization of the military, special forces and chain of commands in the military. Steps were taken for democratization of civil bureaucracy, election commission and the political structure, expansion of country's economic and human infrastructure growth, starting first with the agriculture, land reforms, and government control of major private industries, industrialization and the expansion of the higher education system throughout the country. In 1974, Bhutto succumbed to increasing pressure from religious parties and helped Parliament to declare the Ahmadiyya adherents as non-Muslims. Bhutto's efforts undermined and dismantled the private sector and conservative approach for political power in country's political setup. Relations with the U.S. gradually went down, and completing the gap after normalizing the relations with the USSR, Eastern Bloc, North Korea, China, and the Arab world. With Soviet technical assistance, the country's first steel mill was established in Karachi, which proved to be a crucial step in industrializing the economy. Alarmed by the surprise nuclear test by India in 1974, the atomic bomb project accelerated as Bhutto redeeming and keeping his 1965 promised, "If India builds the bomb, we will eat grass and leaves, even go hungry. But we will get one of our own, we have no alternative." To the nation. This crash project reached a historical milestone in 1978 when the desired level of production of fissile core material was reached, as well as first design of physics package, which eventually led to a secret subcritical testings in 1983. Relations with India soured and Bhutto launched aggressive diplomatic war and measures against India at the United Nations. Openly targeting Indian nuclear program on multiple occasions and pushing India on the defense, Bhutto's covertly worked on expanding the atomic bomb project on the shortest time possible. From 1976 to 1977, Bhutto more densely emphasized his political position and faced an intense and heated diplomatic war with the United States and President Jimmy Carter, who worked covertly to damage the credibility of Bhutto in Pakistan. Bhutto, with his scientist colleague Aziz Ahmed, thwarted any U.S. attempts to infiltrate the atomic bomb program. In 1976, during a secret mission, Henry Kissinger threatened Bhutto and his colleague using an inhumane language. After the meeting, Bhutto aggressively put efforts to successfully develop the atomic project before the coming elections. As the country entered 1976, the Socialist alliance of Bhutto collapsed, forcing his left-wing allies to form an alliance with right-wing conservatives, to challenge the power of People's Party. In 1977, the general elections were held which marked the People's Party as victorious, but this was challenged by the opposition, which accused Bhutto of rigging the election process. An intensified political disorder took place against Bhutto, and in an excess of Chief of Army Staff General Muhammad Zia ul-Haq and Chief of Naval Staff Admiral Muhammad Sharif, took power in a bloodless coup. Following this, Bhutto and his leftist colleagues were dragged into a 2-year-long controversial trial in Supreme Court. Bhutto was later executed in 1979, after being convicted of authorizing the murder of a political opponent, in a controversial 4-3 split decision by the Supreme Court. Second Military Era. This period of military rule, lasting from 1977 to 1988, is often regarded as a period of great purge and growth of state-sponsored religious conservatism. Although, President Zia's long 11-year rule era features the country's first successful technocracy, but other side, it also features the tug-of-war between far leftist forces in direct competition with populist far-right circles. President Zia made strong use of installing high-profile military officers from joint services of joint forces in civilian posts, ranging from central government to provisional governments. Gradually, the socialist influence in the public policies were disbanded, instead a new system of capitalism was revived with the introduction of corporatization and Islamization. The populist front against Zulfikar Ali Bhutto scattered, with far right-wing conservatives allying with General Zia's government and encouraging the military government crackdown on the pro-Soviet left-wing elements in the country. The left-wing alliance led by Benazir Bhutto was brutalized by Zia, who took every means of aggressive measures against the movement. Further, in his time, secessionist uprisings in Balochistan were put down successfully by the provincial governor, General Rahmuddin Khan. In 1984, Zia held a referendum asking the civil society for the support of his religious program that received overwhelming support and extended the term of General Zia as country's administrator for the next 5 years. He then introduced strict Islamic law in 1978, often cited as the contributing factor in the present climate of sectarianism and religious fundamentalism in Pakistan. General Zia's government disbanded the Western-styled songs, only patriotic songs were allowed in national television. The Ordinance 20 was introduced to limit the Ahmadis from calling themselves Muslims. After Zia assuming power, Pakistan's relations with Soviet Union deteriorated after Zia renewed strong relations with the United States, whilst accelerated the atomic bomb projects to counter the Soviet communism. Repressive situation in communist Afghanistan invited the Soviet Union's intervention, and President Reagan immediately jumped to help Zia to supply and finance an anti-Soviet insurgency in Afghanistan, using Pakistan as a conduit. Zia's military administration effectively handled national security matters and notably managed the multi-billion-dollar aid from the United States. An overwhelming majority of Afghan Pashtun took a refuge in the country fleeing the Soviet occupation. During this time, it was the largest refugee population in the world, which had a heavy impact on Pakistan, and its effects continue to this day. In retaliation, the Afghan Secret Police, KHAD, mastered the idea of terrorism after carrying out a large number of terrorist operations against Pakistan, which also suffered from an influx of illegal weapons and drugs from Afghanistan. Responding to the terrorism, Zia used the counter-terrorism tactics after allowing the religiously far-right parties to send thousands of young students of clerical schools participate in Afghan jihad against the Soviet Union. Problems with India rose up when India attacked and took the Siachen Glacier, prompting Pakistan to strike back at India. The Indian Army were pushed back by Pakistan Army, leading Indian Army to formalize a controversial military exercise, summoning up to 400,000 troops near southern Pakistan. Facing an indirect war with Soviet Union in West, General Zia used the cricket diplomacy to lessen the tensions between two countries but reportedly threatened India by adding to Rajiv Gandhi, "If your forces crossed our border in Inca, we are going to annihilate your." Under pressure by President Ronald Reagan, General Zia finally lifted martial law in 1985, holding non-partisan elections and hand-picking Muhammad Khan Junajo to be the new prime minister, who readily extended Zia's term as Chief of Army Staff until 1990. Junajo however gradually fell out with Zia as his administrative independence grew. For instance, Junajo signed the Geneva Accord, which Zia greatly frowned upon. As retaliation, a controversy was planned after a large-scale blast at a munitions dump and Prime Minister Junajo vowed to bring to justice those responsible for the significant damage caused, implicating several senior generals. In return, General Zia dismissed the Junajo government on several charges in May 1988 and called for elections in November 1988. However, before the elections could ever take place, General Zia died in a mysterious plane crash on August 17, 1988. During the end times of Zia's regime, there was a popular wave of cultural change in the country. Despite Zia's tough rhetoric against the Western culture and music in the country, the underground rock music jolted the country and revived the Kaitya counter-attack on Indian film industry. The 80s fashion such as hairstyles and clothing was very popular in the country and on casual basis at the five-star hotels in the country and near the residence of President Zia ul-Haq, the rock bands performed Western-influenced rock music, and generally were welcomed by the public and some government elements. Third Democratic Era, Benazir Bhutto's period. Democracy returned again in 1988 after the general elections which were held after the death of President General Zia ul-Haq. The elections marked the return of People's Party back into the power whose leader, Benazir Bhutto, became the first female Prime Minister of Pakistan as well as the first female head of government in a Muslim-majority country. This period, lasting until 1999, introduced the parliamentary system and competitive two-party democracy in the country, featuring a fierce competition between centre-right conservatives led by Nawaz Sharif and centre-left socialists directed by Benazir Bhutto. The far-left politics and the far-right politics had disintegrated from the political arena with the fall of global communism and the United States lessening its interests in Pakistan. It was during the 1990s when various bands released their highly acclaimed and commercially successful albums which led to the boom of rock music in Pakistan's music industry. Following the success of Vital Signs and other bands, the rock music band's enormous popularity and success significantly opened a new wave of rock music and opened a modern chapter in the history of Pakistan, bringing the significant shift of country's conservative transformation into semi-Western modernism during 1990s. Benazir Bhutto presided the country during the penultimate times of Cold War, and cemented pro-Western policies due to common distrust of communism. Her government oversaw the successful troop evacuation of Soviet Union from neighboring communist Afghanistan. Soon after the evacuation, the alliance with US came to end when the secret of a successful clandestine atomic bomb project was revealed to the world which led to imposition of economic sanctions by the United States. In 1989, she ordered a military intervention in Afghanistan that brutally failed, leading her to depose the directors of the intelligence services. With offering American aid to the country, she hastily imposed the Seventh Plan to restore the national economy while centralizing the economy. Nonetheless, the economic situation worsened when the state currency of Pakistan lost the currency war with India. The country significantly entered an era of stagflation during this period, and her government was soon dismissed by the conservative President ul-Haq Khan. The 1990 general elections allowed the right-wing Conservative Alliance, the Islamic Democratic Alliance led by Nawaz Sharif, to form the government under a democratic system for the first time in history. Attempts to end the stagflation, Sharif launched the privatization and economic liberalization while on the other hand, adopted a policy of ambiguity on atomic bomb programs. Sharif intervened in Gulf War in 1991. And ordered an operation against the liberal forces in Karachi in 1992. Institutional problems arose with President Khan, whose attempt was to dismiss Sharif on the same charges as he had pressed on Benazir Bhutto. Through the Supreme Court judgment, Sharif was restored and together with Benazir Bhutto ousted President Ishaq Khan from the presidency. Later in weeks, Sharif was forced to relinquish office by the military leadership. During the general elections, Benazir Bhutto secured the plurality and formed the government after appointing a hand-picked president for the presidential office and a new cabinet. Approving the appointments of all four-star chiefs of Navy, Air Force, Army and Chairman Joint Chiefs, the internal policies were exercised on tough stance to bring political stability in the country. Her tough rhetoric earned her a nickname Iron Lady by her rivals. Proponents of social democracy and national pride were supported at an extreme level while the nationalization and centralization of economy continued after the Eighth Plan was enacted to end the historical era of stagflation. Her foreign policy made an efforts to balance the relations with the Iran, United States, Western world, and socialist states. Relations with India and Afghanistan worsened in 1995 when allegations were leveled of Pakistan and other countries providing economic and military aid to the group from 1994 as a part of supporting the anti-Soviet alliance. Pakistan was one of 3 countries which recognized the Taliban government and Mullah Muhammad Omar as the legitimate ruler of Afghanistan. Benazir Bhutto continued her pressure on India, pushing India on to take defensive positions on its nuclear program. Benazir Bhutto clandestine initiatives modernized and expanded the atomic bomb program after launching the missile system programs. In 1994, she successfully approached the France for the technology transfer of AIP technology to the country. Focusing on culture development, her policies resulted in shaping the rock and pop music industry in the country, and film industry made its notable comeback after introducing new talent to the public. She exercised tough policies to ban the Indian media in the country, while promoting television industry to produce dramas, films, artist programs, and music, extremely devoting to the country. The grievousness and public angst about the weaknesses of Pakistan education led to large-scale federal support for science education and research in the country by both Benazir and Nawaz Sharif to meet with the competition with India. Despite her tough policies, the popularity of Benazir Bhutto waned after her husband became allegedly involved in the controversial death of Murtaza Bhutto. Many public figures and officials suspected even Benazir Bhutto's involvement in the murder, although there were no proofs. In 1996, 7 weeks past this incident, Benazir Bhutto's government was dismissed by her own hand-picked president on charges of Murtaza Bhutto's death. The 1997 election resulted in Conservatives receiving a heavy majority of the vote, obtaining enough seats in Parliament to change the constitution, which Prime Minister Sharif amended to eliminate the formal checks and balances that restrain the Prime Minister's power. Institutional challenges to his authority, led by the civilian President Farooq Laghari, Chairman Joint Chiefs General Janga Karamat, Chief of Naval Staff Admiral Fawza Bokhari, and Chief Justice Sajjad Ali Shah, were put down and all 4 were forced to resign. Chief Justice Shah doing so after the Supreme Court was stormed by Sharif partisans. Problems with India further escalated in 1998, when the television media reported the Indian nuclear explosions, code-name Operation Shakti. When news flooded in Pakistan, a shocked Sharif called for a national security meeting in Islamabad and vowed that she would give a suitable reply to the India answer. After reviewing the effects of tests for roughly 2 weeks, Sharif ordered PAEC to perform a series of nuclear tests at the remote area of Shagai Hills in 1998 itself. The military forces in the country were mobilized at a war situation level on Indian border. Internationally condemned, but extremely popular at home, Sharif took steps to control the economy and mobilized all the defense assets of Pakistan by closed all airspace routes by giving red alerts orders to PAF and Pakistan Navy. Sharif responded fiercely, and diffused the international pressure by targeting India for global nuclear proliferation while gave great criticism to the United States for atomic bombings on Japanese cities of atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. If Pakistan had wanted, she would have conducted nuclear tests 20 years ago. But the abject poverty of the people of the region dissuaded her. Pakistan from doing so. But the ult, instead of putting pressure on her not to take the destructive Rawada, imposed all kinds of sanctions on Pakistan for no fault of her. If Japan had its own nuclear capability, Hiroshima and Nagasaki would not have suffered atomic destruction at the hands of the United States. Under Nawaz Sharif's leadership, Pakistan became the seventh nuclear power country, the first country in the Muslim world, as well as a declared nuclear weapon state. The conservative government also adopted environmental policies after establishing the Environmental Protection Agency. Sharif too continued Bhutto's cultural policies, though he did allow Indian channels to be viewed in the country. The next year, Kargil War by Pakistan-backed Kashmiri militants threatened to escalate to a full-scale war and increased fears of a nuclear war in South Asia. Internationally condemned, the Kargil War was followed by Atlantique incident which came on a bad juncture for the Prime Minister Sharif, who no longer held the public support for his government. On October 12, 1999, Prime Minister Sharif's daring attempt to dismiss General Pervez Musharraf from the posts of Chairman Joint Chiefs and Chief of Army Staff failed after the military leadership refused to accept the appointment of ISI Director Lieutenant General Ziauddin Bhatt as Chairman and Army Chief. General Musharraf returning to Pakistan from a PIA commercial airliner, Sharif ordered the Jinnah terminal to be sealed to prevent the landing of the PIA flight, which then circled the skies over Karachi for several hours. A counter-coup d'état copyright attack was initiated, the senior commanders of the military leadership ousted Sharif's government and took over the airport. The flight landed with only a few minutes of fuel to spare. The military police seized the Prime Minister's secretariat and deposed Sharif, Ziauddin Bhatt and the cabinet staffers who took part in this assumed conspiracy. Shifting placed him in infamous Adila jail. A quick trial was set in Supreme Court which gave Sharif a life sentence, with his assets being frozen based on a corruption scandal, and he was near receiving the death sentence based on the hijacking case. Third Military Era, Musharraf Aziz period. The news of the Sharif's dismissal made headlines all over the world, and under pressure by the U.S. President Bill Clinton and King Fahd of Saudi Arabia, Musharraf succumbed to spare Sharif's life in an agreement facilitated by Saudi Arabia. Departed to Saudi Arabia to be settled in a Jeddah in King Fahd's private residence, Sharif was forced to be out of politics for nearly 10 years. The presidency of Musharraf features the coming of liberal forces in the national power for the first time in the history of Pakistan. Earlier initiatives taken towards the continuation of economic liberalization, privatization, and freedom of media in Pakistan in 1999. The Citibank executive, Shaukat Aziz, returned to country upon Musharraf's request to take the control of the national economy after securing the appointment in Finance Ministry in 1999. In 2000, the government issued a massive nationwide amnesty to the political workers of liberal parties, sidelining the conservatives and leftists in the country. Reviewing the policy to create a counter-cultural attack on India, Musharraf personally signed and issued hundreds of licenses to private sector to open new media houses and set up channels, free from government influence. On May 12, 2000, the Supreme Court ordered the government to hold general elections by October 12, 2002. Ties with the United States were renewed by Musharraf, who endorsed the U.S. invasion of Afghanistan as reactionary to 9/11 attacks in the United States, in 2001. Confrontation with India continued over the disputed Kashmir, which led to serious military standoff in 2002 after India alleged Pakistan-backed Kashmiri militants laid the attack on Indian Parliament in ending month of 2001. Military formations and deployment continued in all over the country during this period, with stationing of 11 corps in northwestern Pakistan while the rest of the components were positioned in eastern, southern, and the northern borders of the country. Attempting to legitimize his presidency and assuring its continuance after the impending elections, Musharraf held a controversial referendum in 2002, which allowed the extension of his presidential term to a period ending 5 years. The LFO Order No. 2002 was issued by Musharraf in August 2001, which established the constitutional basis for his continuance in office. The 2002 general elections marked the Liberals, the MQM, and centrist PML-Q, winning the majority in the parliament to form the government. The LFO effectively paralysed the state parliament for over a year, which Musharraf succumbed to his parliamentary opponents to reach a concession on December 2003. The Musharraf-backed Liberals mustered the two-thirds majority required to pass the 17th Amendment to the Constitution of Pakistan. Transformation of country's political system from parliamentary republic into semi-presidential republic was made through 17th Amendment, which retroactively legitimized Musharraf's 1999 actions and many of his subsequent decrees. In a vote of confidence on January 2004, Musharraf won 658 out of 1,170 votes in the Electoral College, and according to Article 41(8) of the Constitution of Pakistan, was elected to the office of President. Soon after his presidential election, Musharraf increased the role of Shaukat Aziz in the parliament and helped him to secure the party nomination for the office of Prime Minister. With Shaukat Aziz becoming the Prime Minister in 2004, his regime yielded positive results on economic front and his proposed social reforms were met with resistance. The far-right Religious Alliance mobilized itself in fierce opposition to Musharraf and Aziz, who were dismayed by their post-9/11 alliance with the United States and endorsement of military support to the U.S. forces in 2001 campaign in Afghanistan. In over 2 years, several attempts were survived by Musharraf and Aziz hatched by al-Qaeda, including at least 2 instances where they had inside information from a member of his military administration. On foreign fronts, the allegations of nuclear proliferation further damaged Musharraf and Aziz's credibility when country's scientists were accused of suspected activities of giving and sharing the technology to global atomic proliferation. Repression and subjugation in tribal line led to a heavy fighting in Warsk between Pakistan Armed Forces and 400 al-Qaeda operatives who were entrenched in several fortified settlements on March 2004. The hunt for Egyptian Ayman al-Zawahiri was launched in the border side of the country, contributing and sparking the sectarian violence. This new war forced the government to sign a truce with the militants on September 5, 2006. Nonetheless, the sectarian violence continued. Since 2001 and onward, Nawaz Sharif and Benazir Bhutto's popular support was gaining a lot of momentum in the country. In 2007, Sharif made a daring attempt to return from exile but was refrained from landing at Islamabad terminal. Sharif was forcefully departed to Saudi Arabia on a first given flight. Whilst outside the airport there were violent confrontations between Sharif supporters and the police. This did not deter another former Prime Minister, Benazir Bhutto, from returning on October 18, 2007 after an 8-year exile in Dubai and London, to prepare for the parliamentary elections to be held in 2008. While leading a massive rally of supporters, 2 deadly suicide attacks were carried out in an attempt to assassinate Benazir Bhutto, though she escaped unharmed, but there were 136 casualties and at least 450 people were injured. With Aziz completing his term, the Liberal alliance now led by Musharraf was further weakened after General Musharraf proclaimed a state of emergency and sacked the Chief Justice Iftikhar Chaudhry along with other 14 judges of the Supreme Court, on November 3, 2007. Political situation became more chaotic when the lawyers launched a protest against this action, but they were arrested. All private media channels including foreign channels were banned, and Musharraf declared that the state of emergency would end on December 16, 2007. The global financial crises, energy crises, domestic crime and violence further escalated as Musharraf made desperate attempt to contain the political pressure. Stepping down from the military, Musharraf was sworn in for a second presidential term on November 28, 2007. Popular support for Musharraf declined when Nawaz Sharif, this time accompanied by his younger brother and his daughter, successfully made a second attempt to return from exile. Hundreds of their supporters, including a few leaders of the party, were detained before the pair arrived at Iqbal Terminal, on November 25, 2007. Nawaz Sharif filed his nomination papers for 2 seats in the forthcoming elections, whilst Benazir Bhutto filed for 3 seats including one of the reserved seats for women. departing an election rally in Rawalpindi on December 27, 2007, Benazir Bhutto was assassinated by a gunman who shot her in the neck and set off a bomb, killing 20 other people and injuring several more. The exact sequence of the events and cause of death became points of political debate and controversy, because, although early reports indicated that Benazir Bhutto was hit by shrapnel or the gunshots, the Pakistan Interior Ministry maintained that her death was due from a skull fracture sustained when the explosive waves threw her against the sunroof of her vehicle. The issue remains controversial and the investigations were further conducted by British Scotland Yard. After a meeting in Islamabad, the Election Commission announced that, due to the assassination, the elections, which had been scheduled for January 8, 2008, would take place on February 18. The 2008 general elections marked the return of the leftists in the country's power politics. On February 18, 2008, the left-oriented PPP and conservative PML won majority of seats together in the election and formed a coalition government. The Liberal alliance then finally faded. Yousaf Reza Gilani of PPP became the Prime Minister and consolidated his power after ending a policy deadlock in order to lead the movement to impeach the president on August 7, 2008. Before restoring the deposed judiciary, Gilani and his leftist alliance leveled accusation against Musharraf for weakening Pakistan's unity, violating its constitution and creating economic impasse. As momentum on Musharraf gained, President Musharraf began consultations with his close aides on the implications of the impeachment and readily made available himself to reply to the charges levied upon him. Gilani's effective strategy to force Musharraf from presidency succeeded when Pervez Musharraf announced in a very short long televised address to the nation to announce his resignation, ending his 9-year-long reign on August 18, 2008. Fourth Democratic Era. The unpopular war in Afghanistan, suspension of Chief Justice, and state emergency had weakened Musharraf, and a massive left-wing alliance led by Prime Minister Yousaf Reza Gilani ousted Pervez Musharraf. In an indirect election, Asif Zardari succeeded Musharraf, and the current period marks the return of the left-right directional politics but also features of the multi-party democracy. After the elections, Yousaf Reza Gilani presided the country as the Prime Minister and headed the collective government, with the winner parties of the 4 provinces. Gilani proposed the idea of collective leadership with the installment major parties of the 4 provinces in the government. Objections raised by conservative PMLN was replaced with centrist, PML, Q. Presided by Gilani, a major transformation in a political structure was carried out to replace the semi-presidential system into parliamentary democracy system. The parliament unanimously passed the 18th Amendment to the Constitution of Pakistan, which signifies the parliamentary democracy in the country. Lessening the powers of the president to dissolve the parliament unilaterally, it turns the president into a ceremonial head of state and transfers the authoritarian and executive powers to the prime minister. Indiana, 2009-11, Gilani, under pressure from the public and cooperating with the United States, ordered the armed forces to launch military campaigns against Taliban advancing in the country. The joint forces operations quelled and crushed the Taliban militias in the country, but the terrorist attacks continued in elsewhere of the country. The country's media was further liberalized with the banning of the Indian channels, the music, art, and cultural activities were promoted to the national level, devoted to the nationalist spirit. In 2010 and 2011, the anti-American emotions reached to a climax after a CIA contractor killed civilians in Lahore, which further fractured relations with the United States. In the United States as well, the anti-Pakistan sentiment increased after the execution of the secret operation conducted in Abbottabad that killed the al-Qaeda supremo Osama bin Laden, without the knowledge of Pakistan government. A strong U.S. criticism was made against Pakistan for supporting a network of hiding al-Qaeda supremo. Gilani called his government to overlook the foreign policy. Steps were taken by Gilani to block all major supply lines after the NATO attack. Relations with Russia advanced in 2012, following the secret trip of country's Foreign Minister Hainer Khan. Following endless procrastination of Gilani in probing corruption charges as ordered by the Supreme Court, and treating it as contempt of court, the Supreme Court ousted Gilani from the office on April 26, 2012, and was quickly succeeded by Pervez Ashraf. After the parliament historically completed its term, the general elections held on May 11, 2013 changed the country's political landscape when conservative PML-N achieved the near supermajority in the parliament. Nawaz Sharif took the oath and became the Prime Minister of Pakistan on May 28. As of August 2013, national debates continue over the ongoing sequestration, the country's foreign policy, gun control, taxation, immigration, and anti-terrorism reforms. See also. References. Further reading. External links: National Fund for Cultural Heritage, Government of Pakistan, Story of Pakistan, History of Pakistan at DMOZ, Wikimedia Atlas of the History of Pakistan.